Good morning. I'm a little humbled at the fact that 47 people have shown up so far just to listen to me ramble, but I hope I can do some things and say some things that will give you some insight as to what ATI has been doing over the last few months. I got here February 17th, so I've been here 4 months, and it's been an interesting 4 months, I think, for all of us. And in some ways, it's been, I think, a unique challenge to really try to get a lot of things off the ground and coordinated and so forth, just given the complexity of communication and interaction during the pandemic. People are still showing up. This is awesome. So anyway, I really appreciate you guys being here today and taking a few minutes to go through this stuff. I will say that this is being recorded. A couple of people actually asked to watch it later, which I find overwhelming and mind-boggling to me. But and I apologize for being a little distracted with all the bells. We're gonna try to go through this without questions during the session, but if you will type your questions into the chat, Margaret Ann is kind of monitoring that, and toward the end of the session, we'll try to get through the questions. And if you ask a question, Margaret Ann may call on you, so be prepared to kind of jump in at that point. If you don't want to admit to being here at that point, you can just not say anything, and I'll try to answer your question anyway. So that's where we are. And so what I want to talk about today is the ATI strategic planning process. And how we have sort of gotten this off the ground going forward here, and what I see as the opportunities and challenges for ATI going forward. So there are really 3 questions that I want to address. First of all, what is ATI? That's a question that frankly, as the new person here, I have wanted to answer. And in getting things kind of kicked off, I have had to address that question. And I don't have the final answer. I think it's an evolving answer, but it's something that I will say a few words about. And then how is ATI doing, which I feel a little maybe over my head trying to lecture you guys on how this is doing, since its history has pretty much transpired in my absence. So how ATI is doing is a function of the great work that you guys have been doing, and I'll say a few words about that. And then where is ATI going? And that's the majority of the presentation, which centers on the strategic planning process. So what is ATI? This picture is pretty much one that's been in existence for a little while. And so you may recognize it. The idea of ATI is that it's a family of centers around a central hub, and that's what this picture really reflects. And the purpose of the hub is to do really 2 things. One is to engage stakeholders, and in large part, those stakeholders being external to the university, and then to facilitate collaboration both among the partners, among the family of centers that make up ATI, as well as with external stakeholders and with other parts of the University of Alabama. And the theme, of course, of ATI is transportation. I think that pretty much is self-evident. One of the things that I've sort of grappled with in trying to understand this for my purposes, in trying to plan how this looks going forward, is what is the difference between a center and an institute? And I think that's a question that could be answered broadly and philosophically, or could be answered very specifically for the University of Alabama. But even when we answer it very specifically for the University of Alabama, there's a little bit of an inconsistency because, as you probably know, institute kind of means a couple of different things. Institutes, there are certain institutes that are kind of legacies of before we had the four, what I'll call signature research institutes that report to the Office of Research and Economic Development. And so when I say institute here, I'm really referring to those four institutes: the Cyber Institute, which is currently referred to as the Cyber Initiative, the Transportation Institute, the Water Institute, and the Life Research Institute. When I refer to those, and as I've tried to understand what their intent is, and a lot of this influenced by our university leadership and our Vice President for Research and Economic Development, the idea of an institute in this sense seems to be a collection of centers. Now that's a fairly simplistic view. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that we talked about in the previous slide, but I think it's important to put that alongside the notion of a center, which is a collection of researchers. And so in some sense, we might say that institutes are meta centers. They are kind of higher level centers that are really centers of centers. And that's really the sense in which I want to think about ATI. It's not just a center of centers, but at its core, that seems like a good place to start. And so what's the point of having a center of centers? Well, the idea is to really scale. And so we want to achieve research at scale. And so we want to take small to medium-sized centers and even a few large centers and put them into a community that can work together in a collaborative way to compete for really large opportunities for funding. And so it's a place to put together centers and go after big ideas and big funding opportunities. And so that's the context in which I would frame ATI and this family of centers that I mentioned at the outset. So that's question one. We're already a third of the way through. That's the good news. So question two, how is ATI doing? And this again is something that I feel a little bit inadequate to address, because I think this is really your work, not mine. But in ATI's short period of existence, I count about $100 million of project impact to the state. Now, some of that's essentially federal money that's been brought to the state. Some of it is state money that's been leveraged by the federal money to go after or to augment projects. But at the end of the day, ATI has brought to bear about $100 million to various kinds of projects. Some of them are road building projects. Some of them are more technology-based projects. And some of them are traffic maintenance operations type projects. But at the end of the day, that footprint and that impact is significant. I count, depending on how you count them, about 80 to 100 papers and reports. I'll be very kind of loose with that, but there's a lot of different things that have been produced that are either research artifacts or artifacts that have been taken back to the state and used to influence anything from policy to assisting with engineering types of activities to whatever. Thirdly, there is for many of you who've been to Cyber Hall know this, a a collaborative facility here with the Department of Transportation. It's kind of a living laboratory. The picture of the living laboratory is on this slide, but it's basically a traffic operations center for the West Alabama region. It's staffed 24/7 to address traffic operations kinds of issues. And the fourth thing is that a lot of the success of ATI is really in the centers that make up kind of that ATI family of centers. And many of those have significant successes on their own that I think together can help tell a story that the University of Alabama is having a substantial impact in transportation. ATI highlights specifically from this past year. I sort of have been getting this together for annual reports that are due shortly, but the big project that's kind of framed by the two pictures at the top of this slide is something called the Action Grant, which is a $16.3 million project to support traffic management technology development and deployment in and around the Tuscaloosa area, and involves research and development opportunities around that deployment. About half of that is federal money, and the other half is what the state has brought in terms of match. And then there was another large grant that has come to the city of Tuscaloosa to support the replacement of the University Boulevard over McFarland Bridge out there by DCH. That's in the form of an infra grant. There was a project down in Mobile to potentially look at enhancement and modification of the I-10 bridge over Mobile Bay, and we provided a substantial analysis component. That project has been, I guess, suspended at the moment. There is another similar report that we did down in Coffee County and down in the Wiregrass area that's kind of a similar nature, and we have a significant research footprint. So I'm still refining that list of 5 things, but roughly speaking, those are kind of some things that the Institute has been up to, more or less internal to the Institute and the Transportation Policy Research Center, which is housed inside the Institute. That doesn't count, I think, the outstanding work that the centers are also doing. That would take several more slides, but the work here is really phenomenal, and that's one reason that I really felt like this was the opportunity of a lifetime to come here. The other big project that's in the offing is that there is a building next to Cyber Hall. It's kind of a parallel looking building. It's a little mangled up and abandoned right now, called One North. That is another old hospital that the university has obtained funding and approval to begin to renovate this building into something that its current working title is the Alabama Transportation Center. This is joint with ALDOT and the city of Tuscaloosa. It's an enlarged traffic operations center so that our co-location with our partners will continue to increase. And of course, that gives us more opportunities for collaboration, and that's opening. It looks like, I mean, the best construction estimate right now is 18 months from now, which would be early 2022. So now we're 2/3 done. Here's the part that I really feel like that I really have contributed to over the last 4 months, and that's kind of trying to define the future, sort of where ATI is going, what's ahead of us. And that process has really been centered on a strategic plan. And so that strategic planning process, first of all, is something that ORED and the university have been both pretty in sync on ever since President Bell came here, and then Vice President Mumper as well. And so what I wanted to do was dovetail into that strategic planning process with a strategic plan for ATI. So the fact that it's mandated, though, by my boss doesn't mean that that's the reason that I did it, although it always helps. But you know, the reason I did it is because I think it's a good idea. We need a document that will help guide our path forward. So we haven't had long to do this. I felt like that it's something that we needed to do right away. It is not done, but it is at a point where I want to scale it to the larger population. So I started initiating kind of an informal process back in March, where I have been having a lot of meetings and conversations to the extent that's possible. Many of those have been over Zoom, and which is kind of, I know, for all of us, an endless experience of late. I have tried to structure some of our stakeholders into an internal leadership team, an executive committee that extends beyond just the internal folks, but includes basically the other occupants of Cyber Hall, the folks that kind of spend a lot of time on a daily basis interacting with me and with the core of the Transportation Institute. And then something that was called in the founding document of ATI, the Coordinating Council, which is really all the centers in that big round picture that we looked at earlier. So I've tried to engage that group pretty heavily in the discussions and early drafts of the plan. We've done a few surveys, but we haven't really gotten to everybody, and we've had a few presentations and meetings. But this is really the largest one, and the one that I really wanted to kick off a more structured process going forward. Obviously, in order to really scale this up to a completed product, we've got to change from kind of the informal methods that we've been using to a more scalable, formal approach. So I'm going to talk about what that really looks like, and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to actually several opportunities to participate in that process. And so we're going to have several town halls about the strategic plan. And then I'm going to publish a quote unquote final version this fall. But even that version, in my mind, is still a living document. It's something that we will continue to evolve over time. So I'll give you kind of the picture of kind of the formal process here. So we have a version of the plan that I will call a straw dog. This is all about dogs. I actually like dogs, so we'll do dogs. Apologies for those of you that like cats. But we'll have a straw dog plan. It exists. It will be distributed and made available to folks basically today. I've got it. I just actually haven't sent it, but that will be available today. We will have wooden dog 1st of August. Steel dog, that'll be great, just in time for the football season that we hope actually exists, and then iron dog by October. And so the theory of this is, this to me, I mean, it's not necessarily the way I would always do this, but I really feel like that this is a scalable process. It's one that we can get everybody involved in. And so I'm going to give you a straw dog plan today. I'm going to invite participation via surveys and other engagement. And this month we will transform that into a wooden dog, and then a steel dog, and an iron dog. And we'll repeat that process basically each month. So it'll be a monthly cycle. If it looks like that's unwieldy, I'm not opposed to elongating the cycles. Right now, my target is to try to do one cycle a month so that we end up with a plan that's pretty solid by October. if that stretches out a few more months, it's not the end of the world. But the most important thing is that whatever plan we produce has good, solid stakeholder engagement. And that's really what I'm imploring today. I really need your help in getting us to that point. So let me talk about the straw dog for a second. So I have some data on some surveys that some of you filled out to try to really do some basic SWOT type analysis. For the most part, I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on this. You can look at it and see some of the items. But I think like a lot of organizations, we have strong people. We have some significant success to date. The organization, I feel like, started like a lot of startup organizations. There was some pressure, I guess, to try to invest and to move forward and to get some successes. And the cost of doing that is almost always that you're kind of running around doing 20 million things at once. And so the processes, the planning, some of the organization and structuring doesn't get done first. And I think that's fairly typical. So there were some things like we really didn't have an accountant. We really didn't have a financial plan. Some other things like that we really needed to try to rectify. And then, we're always looking at opportunities and threats, and, opportunities are, there are a lot of, I'll just say there are a lot of opportunities out there, and there's more opportunity for engagement with cities and counties in Alabama, and I'm really looking forward to trying to do that. There are obviously always threats. COVID-19 has been a threat to all of us, and so we have to continue to grapple with those kind of things on the horizon. But generally, this is kind of where I started. We did a little crafting on a mission statement, and this is where we are so far. This is definitely the straw dog one, so you will have an opportunity, and I really would look to you for strengths and weaknesses of this mission statement, ways that you think it needs to be improved, what's left out of it, what could we add to it, and so on. I will make a couple of comments. And this is kind of reflecting my view, but I want ATI to reflect almost like a mirror of what's going on at UA. I don't necessarily think ATI is where the work will be done, because I think, as I already talked about, a lot of the work is done in the centers. But I do think it's important that ATI tell the story about the work, the really good work that you guys are doing here, that needs to be positioned and told and explained in a way that articulates the value of what UA brings to the transportation community. And I think that's really what our role is. It's also a facilitator of interdisciplinary work, as we already talked about, to bring these centers together to do really big things. And of course, the work that we facilitate and reflect is world-class research that serves the state and beyond. So here's the one that I think might engender the most opinions and controversy. And the question becomes, what are our research themes? And that's a question that really kind of stems from, we can't be good at everything. We aren't big enough. We aren't established enough yet. We don't have as much depth as we need to be good at everything. There are certain institutions and certain transportation institutes around the country, many of you probably would recognize them, that are big and are established and do have a lot of depth and a lot of different things. I think we do need to be somewhat strategic about the things that we do. On the other hand, we can't even aspire to be good at everything, because if there's something that we don't do, then the investment that it takes to really get us to the point where we can do those things is really, in a lot of cases, a very large investment. And there may be cases where we want to make that investment because the opportunities are so significant that we need to make that investment. But generally, those things that we are not already good at are very expensive to acquire the right level of expertise. So the key questions are, kind of what are we good at, and what do we want to aspire to be good at? And honestly, I'm going to give you some straw dog themes. I guess I'm sort of upping the anticipation level a little bit, but I really need your help to figure this out. So this is just the initial cut. This has actually been discussed with practically everybody that's sort of virtually Zoomed by my office over the last 4 months, but I obviously have not talked to every one of you. So I will say this before I'll give you one more anticipation kind of slide. These should be big ideas, should be ideas that go beyond the capability of a single center, should be areas that we are either good at already or areas of opportunity that we aspire to be good at and can afford to invest in. So here are the ones that I currently have on the sort of docket, or on the table, I guess. And these are things that have kind of been worked through, wordsmithed, and are continuing to evolve. So I invite you to kind of look at that list. While you're looking, I'm going to try an experiment, which is I'm going to launch a poll. So if you are on a screen and you can respond to the poll, feel free to do that. So that'll be somewhat interesting. Looks like people are responding a little bit. And once we have ended the polling, then I'll show you the results. So, I'm actually curious about that as well. Now you might say, well, what are some of these things? And I think some of them are fairly obvious. I think the one that is probably a little bit of an unknown is the first one. And my own background might sort of lead you to think that this was my idea. It actually wasn't, although I do like it because I do think that it does engender some opportunities. And so I'm going to keep the poll going for just a minute if I can. So just real quickly, what is digital transportation? I found this little picture that's down at the bottom there that I thought was interesting. It's not exactly the picture that I would draw, but it's not bad. The idea of linking data among many different types of constituencies. And with transportation, there is involvement with vehicles, there's involvement with infrastructure, there's involvement with enforcement operations, freight, transit, and so on. And there's a lot of different pieces to that. And so one of the ideas of that is that somehow we can kind of bring data together into an ecosystem and use that data to support research in a number of different areas. My hawking this, by the way, is not helping its standing in the poll, by the way, just so you know. So I think I'll end polling. Looks like we have 61 votes. So share results. Okay, so obviously transportation, safety, security, and sustainability is kind of the winner. And you can see sort of interesting connected vehicles and infrastructure where there's really good work here. I will say the digital transportation idea links strongly to connected vehicles and infrastructure. So interesting results. I hope that gets saved. Let me stop sharing. I'm gonna kill the poll for a second. All right, so anyway, so there's the list. So I'm gonna go on. Lots of opportunities to really comment on this list. You know, what's on the list that shouldn't be, what's not on the list that should be. I will talk about how we're going to get this input in a little more formal manner than what we just did, but I will continue to stress that emails and conversations are always welcome, even if you disagree with me. I would love to talk to you because I feel like the biggest thing that I really have to do is, you know, I want to hear from everybody, and sometimes I don't necessarily talk to everybody up front for various reasons, and so don't be shy about hitting me with an email. All right, so that gets me then to the draft strategic plan. So we have 4 things here that are kind of strategies, if you will, for this plan. Serve the state is number 1, and in some ways, and I'll talk about this again, but in some ways that to me it's important to put that number 1 because of the level of commitment that the state of Alabama has made to ATI. I feel like that is the most important thing in a lot of ways that we can do. It is closely aligned to number 2, which is to improve research, or more specifically to facilitate the transportation research, development, and innovation portfolio to expand the economy and improve quality of life in Alabama. So even that one is tied heavily to service to the state. And, you know, I will say that the synergy between those 2 is really important. And so I don't want one to outshine the other, or you to feel like that I'm not saying that research is important. I am, but I also think it's important that we have to respect how we are funded and make sure that that research is connected to what is the important issues for our state. Now, in that regard, number 3 is in part designed to facilitate that idea. So communicate impact and opportunity is, sure, it's about tooting our horn, but it's also about trying to explain why the research that we do serves the state. And I think in some cases it's obvious, in other cases, in more basic research context, it may be more challenging to make that explanation, but it's incumbent on us to do it, and it's ATI's responsibility to do it so that those of you who are doing important groundbreaking work can do that work with ATI support and with ATI facilitating you're getting federal support in such a way that the state understands that that what helps you do that helps the state. And so it's very important to me. Telling the story is very, very important. And then the other thing is, you know, it seems like we have a lot of resources and a lot of money. You know, we don't have as much as it seems. And one of the things that we really have to do is figure out how to be efficient in our operations. And that is something that I think has to be part of this discussion. And so one of the things we talked about earlier was the fact that institutes are groups of centers, collections of centers. How can we work together with those centers to organize anything from business processes to infrastructure to other sorts of resources in such a way that we are as good as stewards of our resources as we possibly can be. So let me just quickly talk about or show you a little bit, drilling into each one of these. So service to the state, mission critical products and services. To me, it's very important that we show the state that they can't live without us. And I don't want to put that in a cynical way, but I do want the state and our state partners to understand that we are providing important services, and if they, if we weren't here, there would be struggles that they would not want to entertain. And so how can we do more of that? And I think we have centers that are contributing in very important ways to that already. We, in our short life at ATI proper, which by ATI proper I mean the folks that are within 50 feet of my office, have certainly started to do some things that are very important in becoming emergent mission critical things. But we need to continue that. We need to respond to requests from state partners for assistance in a timely way. A lot of times those requests for assistance are inconvenient, but we have to be prepared to respond to them because frankly, at a low level, they're paying the bill or paying a large percentage of the bill, and so we have to be responsive to their needs. We need to introduce new things that are really important or can become important to Alabama state and local government. I think one thing that we can do more of, and we just need to figure out how to scale this, is helping cities and state agencies and others within our state to write federal proposals to bring more federal money to the state. I think certain cities and agencies are really good at that. Others don't have the depth to do it themselves, and I think that's an opportunity for us to really contribute. Obviously we want to collaborate with our state and local partners through the fact that we have some co-location of offices and operations here in Cyber Hall. And then we need to promote collaboration among centers in serving the state. Facilitating research. We want to develop collaborative and interdisciplinary proposals. We want to direct research development and innovation through ATI funded seed projects. That's been going on very successfully for several years already. We have accumulated some really outstanding talented personnel in ATI that we have hired over the last few years. We need to get a lot of those folks more utilized on funded research projects. We can't sustain the current level of investment on just the state appropriation. We need more funding, and if we can get more funding, then we can even expand that staff. But currently, we've kind of reached our limit, and so we've got to be strategic on how we grow those kinds of opportunities in the future. Obviously, reputational advancement is very, very important to universities, and so if we want to be known for transportation, we need to enhance the reputation of our transportation researchers. And we need to, again, promote collaboration among centers, this time to conduct research. So then on the communication side, we need a digital brand and presence. We need to implement engagements with the legislature, corporate, and government partners. We need to establish and maintain a transportation community of practice. I'll just pause here and say it's been a little bit of a challenge for me to figure out who is really affiliated with ATI. It took me a few months, and finally I realized that a lot of people were signed up for this listserv, so they must, have at least at some point gotten suckered into doing that, or alternatively, they really are interested in transportation and ATI. So we need to curate our community and figure out who is really part of the transportation community, so that I can figure out how to help everybody become more engaged. And most importantly, I can reach out to that community for guidance. Become named and endowed. Obviously, if we could get corporate donations and other sorts of gifts, we could, I think, do some really good things. But this one happens to be an ORED strategic plan item, and so this is kind of part of my attempt to be consistent with that. But at the same time, I think it's very important. And lastly, we need to establish an external advisory board as well as work with the internal stakeholder groups. And so trying to figure out and organize who those internal stakeholders are is still a work in progress for me. And we also don't have an external advisory board, but it's something that we do need to establish in the upcoming months. And then lastly, the organize to promote efficiency and communicate value. The first three bullets here are really about collaboration among the centers on really about efficiency. So, collaborate for efficiency, figure out how the centers can better work together, identify a shared infrastructure for the centers. What can we provide in ATI that will help give value to the centers and help them to more efficiently collaborate. What you really like is you don't want to reinvent the wheel, so you don't want to create large infrastructures, especially on the administrative side within each center, if there's a way to do collaboration across center boundaries on that front. And then the fourth bullet here is really about communicating value. So one of the things that we really need to do in order to sort of see how we're doing on this plan is to identify metrics that validate and quantify our success. And so we have some metrics. This is, again, a part of the plan, and so it can be a list that evolves over time. So we have both kind of some qualitative lists as well as some quantitative numbers. The quantitative numbers, of course, are driven by qualitative lists, but the quantitative numbers heavily driven by funding, by citations, by publications, as well as downloads and other such kinds of things. So I guess to kind of summarize all of that, so number one, service to the state's extremely important. Research needs to impact society and have a reputational benefit to UA. I feel like we need to increase funding because of the importance of increasing the university's federal funding, as well as finding more funds to do important work. I feel like we need to keep working, chipping away at the federal funding challenges. We need to increase and quantify our research portfolio. So, where are we in terms of growing our reputation and growing our impact? And then we need to, part of that is just being able to quantify and communicate it. And then, we need to make as efficient use of our resources as we possibly can. So next steps, I'm about done, thankfully. So we have this straw dog plan that will be distributed today or this weekend, if you'll give me just a little bit of time to kind of get that done. And then there will be a formal process to get feedback. So a survey that will really kind of just break the plan down and ask you, if you wish, to provide comments on any parts of it. If you don't wish, then you don't have to. You pick the parts that you do want to comment on. And then we will use that to formulate a wooden dog plan that right now my plan is to do not this long of a version, but a sort of quick summary of the wooden dog at the August town hall. And then in general, these monthly town hall meetings through September really be focused on the strategic plan. After September, my feeling is we probably should have a research topic each month, most months. that's something that we can work on how to do that. I will say this was an idea that Bharat had yesterday that I really thought was a good one, and that is for these research presentations, we really need to focus on group presentations. In other words, not just one person talking, but groups of several people who are working together on a big collaborative project to sort of present their work. And so I like that idea because it really reinforces the idea that what we're really about is doing these big collaborative projects. I will need help with this. Believe me, you don't want to hear from me every month. So we will at some point start lining up an agenda of those for the upcoming year. I suppose the big question is, are those Zoom or in person? I think for right now, they're obviously Zoom. They may continue to be Zoom, you know, like a lot of evolutionary things here. This is at the very least efficient. The thing that it makes it hard to do is have lunch, you know, because we really would like to feed you. So if we ever get past the pandemic where we can feed you, then I will definitely give you the opportunity to come here. But we'll probably continue to offer it kind of as standard over Zoom as well. I guess I'll close with this. You know, I have no real agenda here. There's a lot I don't know. There's a lot of you that I really have not engaged thoroughly with yet. I've just been kind of drinking from a fire hose, and the older I get, the harder it is for me to drink at a fast rate. So I really need your help. The third bullet here is really key. If you don't hear from me and you have something to contribute to my agenda, I just need you to poke me. You know, send me an email and let's talk. It's easy to have a face-to-face conversation over Zoom. I think we all probably are experiencing that. So, and honestly, I've been in my office probably for the last couple of months, and I've got a mask here and everything. So if you want to come by, I'd be more than happy to meet with you in person as well. So I just want to say I really appreciate you guys listening to this for 50 minutes, and I'm happy to take questions. And again, I'm really happy to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you, and I need you to just give me some guidance and tell me what I can do to be of help. So with that, I'll go to questions. Margaret Ann, do we have questions? Or if you're talking, you're muted.
Not at this time.
No questions. Okay. Does anybody want to ask a question? And honestly, I don't know how many people are actually on at the moment. You might be able to just unmute yourself and ask. I see something.
Yeah, Alan, this is Shamit. I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just actually, can we get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so PowerPoint will be distributed. The plan will be distributed. A link to a survey will be distributed, and this is recorded. So if you have colleagues that would want to punish themselves by listening to this, then that's also a available opportunity. We'll get that all shared appropriately.
All right. Thanks.
Dr. Parrish?
Yes.
Could you go back to the research themes slide for a minute?
Sure. If I can figure out how. Hold on. Okay. I don't know what just happened, but. There's probably a better way to do that, but. Oops. All right.
Okay. Does this, you had drawn a distinction between research and service. Does this slide stand for both research and service?
So that's a question that actually you asked yesterday, and I haven't. Well, I mean, which it's I think appropriate to ask it again. I wasn't as ugly as it sounded, but I haven't really grappled with the answer yet. I think, and part of this is, and what Stephen's really asking is, we had a smaller group yesterday where we discussed this. You know, do we have a service mission and a research mission that have distinctly different themes? And if so, what are the distinctly different themes for the two things? And if not, does this set of themes really are these really institute themes rather than institute research themes? And I think that's a really good question, and I think the next version of the plan needs to figure out the answer. I just don't have the answer yet. Stephen has some ideas, and one of the things we talked about yesterday was policy types of things, which is, of course, the mission of the Policy Research Center. And is that a service or a research mission? And should it be articulated as part of the institute themes? And if so, or is that a service theme or a research theme? So it's a good question. I can restate the question. I just don't have the answer yet. But you and I can keep talking about it for sure.
Okay. And yesterday, one of the suggestions that I had was how policy would fit into this, because I don't want someone to look at that and think, oh, policy is not a big deal. But it's possible that the policy should be subject matter based, for example, transportation finance.
Right.
And I'm just throwing that out, not for an answer right now, just so everyone knows that this is a conversation that's happening and that's on the table.
Right. So I think the important thing here, and I feel like I'm going to get, I don't know this yet, but I feel like I'm going to get input from others about this particular thing. And I feel like maybe we do need to spend a little bit of time with a taxonomy or something here that is a little more sophisticated than just a list of 5 bullet points. And I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. I agree that even the question of policy could be articulated as a thing, or it could be articulated as a component of several different subject matters like finance and other things, and how to do that I'm still not quite sure about. But I would love if somebody has any thoughts or would like to educate me on how to do it. I'd love for you to send me an email or come talk to me or whatever. Solana, you are raising your hand, I think.
Yeah. So just a quick background for me to be able to put the comment in context. Many years I worked in transportation operations, and then I moved to planning, exactly to be able to work on the policy realm. Because each one of these things that we have listed in this specific slide, all of them depend on money. And all of them depend on somebody deciding that this is a need and an opportunity. So the process to even making funding available has to do about building the strategy to make this a topic of interest and concern. I see also that I thought I saw in a previous version that resilience was a name included with transportation safety. I thought before was safety, resilience, and sustainability. Now is safety, security, and sustainability. There are very different aspects of things. And even from the funding perspective, it's like if you want to work on security pieces, we will have some challenges with that. So that a lot of that work, if it is like with sensitive information, we're gonna need to have US citizens or permanent residents. Otherwise it can't be done. you know, if you're talking about a certain level of sensitivity on the topic. So some of these things are very important because if we understand how policy plays the role in building the space for us to be able to have funding being built and opportunities being built, then policy supports everything. On the other hand, it's like as some of these things happen and now people don't know exactly what has to be done, or kind of like a consequence of the research that we're doing, then the legislators want to know what is happening, then they come and ask more explanations. You know, so these are a few aspects that I really wanted everybody to think about because they're very important. And just one more piece, Dr. Parrish. One of the important definitions about, you know, is ATI as a whole or just a policy center, you know, how is exactly the mix? There are different types of centers in the United States that have no need to go through competitive processes to be able to get grants. They have established themselves as government service specifically, and then they have the proper piece of paper that documents that, and then they can go straight and say, so what is that you need to have work done? And then the money comes. So I think we need to be able to see where is that competitive approach is okay and desirable, and where is that service direct provision for government is also important and necessary. So these are things that unless you had a little bit of experience with the outside world, it's not something that everybody knows. So I wanted to share this with everybody.
Sounds good. And there's some good thoughts there, and we can certainly go back and talk about that. I see one question about from Juan about we should be having more focused direction. Do we target on a single research theme, or could we focus on multiple of those? Juan, are you still here? If you want to elaborate on that, that's fine, or I'd be glad to answer it. Okay, I don't hear it. I think multiple themes is very appropriate. Obviously, the more connections that we have between these things, the more bigger kinds of ideas that we could look at. Actually, Margaret Ann reminded me that I have one other poll, which is, I don't know if it's really very useful, but if you can see that, those are the 4 elements of the plan. I have a suspicion I know which one's going to win, but if you want to click one, that'd be really interesting. And kind of end on that note. It's interesting. Yeah, I would have guessed correctly. Okay, we have a 77% voting rate. Actually, 81%. That's pretty good. So I will end polling. Share the results. So that's probably about what I would have predicted. And I do think our research mission is very paramount. And the more we can do to connect the first 2 of these ideas between research and service, I think the better off we'll be. Okay, any last questions anybody has?
Alan, this is Shri Aleti from Civil Engineering Department. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. The one thing I realized that in the presentation you mentioned you're going to share these polls and request for the questionnaires
Yeah, absolutely. And I am very sensitive to that, because I am recognizing every few days how I have missed another important constituency. So, you know, I do want to make sure we get good engagement from everybody, even if that slows down the ultimate result. So I will be looking at alternatives for getting in touch with people and making sure we've got everybody to participate who wants to participate.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah, Justin.
Going back to that last poll, I have a comment that I just want people to consider if they are not already, regarding the service mission and the research mission. And I'm not a researcher. I don't spend all of my time doing that type of work. But I would imagine that the people who do that work all the time are doing it for a purpose, and that's to serve society. Maybe not serve the state, but serve society as a whole. You're doing the research to make new discoveries, make breakthroughs that have a positive impact on people's lives. So I don't, in my view at least, I don't see the service mission and the research mission being all that different. So that's just a comment I wanted to relay to the group.
Yeah, I agree. And anything we can do to bring those together is important. I will say, you might be wondering, well, why did you break them out like that to start with? One of the things that I want to make sure I do is help facilitate the budgeting process in a way that I can clearly tie each dollar to exactly what it is that it's really contributing to. And so if it's just service, for instance, and it's not research, then I'd like to say, hey, we put X dollars into this that went directly to serve some aspect of the state. On the other hand, if it's something that's more research oriented, then I want to be able to say, hey, I put this into Yankee Hong, and he just happens to be like on my screen, so I'll pick on him, into his research project. And so, the benefit of that project to the state is X. So I'm really just trying to line up the flow of money in such a way that as we communicate impact and opportunity with people, I want to be able to say, this is our impact. And we've split up kind of all the different pieces of the pie in ways that have had separate but important impacts.
Alan, this is Mukesh Kumar. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can ATI provide us some guidance moving forward, which will help us in clearly defining if our contribution belongs to research or to the service or a service to the state? The reason I ask is much of the research that we do will have some applications in Alabama as well, and we can certainly say that this will be service to the state, maybe not immediately, but maybe 2 years down the line or whatever. So it will help since my understanding is you are saying that you would like to, so to say, clearly identify which category we fall in. And sometimes I feel like if needed, we can always say our research is a service to the state?
Sure. And I think there's some things, and I mean, I could start making up stuff, but that's when I always get in trouble. I think there's some things that I would go, oh yeah, that there's like an immediate impact, and anybody could see that. You know, some of the stuff, I will throw one thing out here since this is kind of from my past life, but I mean, some of the stuff CAPS does, you look at it and you go, what's the impact of that to the state? It's almost immediately evident. And I think then there's other things that are, and this probably is kind of on a spectrum from applied research all the way back to basic research, where you look at the research and you go, okay, that's interesting. It may get a Nobel Prize. It may get a great publication. It may even impact science. But, what's the impact to society? And there almost always is one. And as you say, you can probably almost always find one. I think we need to probably spend some time with each of our research projects, really fleshing out what those impacts are. Because at the end of the day, if somebody's paying for them, I mean, if it's NSF paying for it, they're kind of in the science business. So it's pretty easy to go to NSF and, you just discovered a new compound or a new advanced manufacturing technique or that's probably even a little too applied, but NSF would go, oh yeah, that's our business, so we want to do, we want to invest in that. But if I'm going to the Alabama legislature, I have to spend a little bit of time explaining what that particular piece of science does for Alabama. And you can always make something up. I've done this for years. Oh yeah, my software engineering research impacts society because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, I've been putting that in proposals for years. A lot of times it's just an afterthought and I just kind of make it up. I think we have to spend the time, real serious time in trying to show the translational or do the translational work to show how your research is going to impact Alabama. And I really feel like that ATI can play a role in that. And although Stephen Polonsky and I have not talked about this specifically, one of the roles of the Transportation Policy Research Center, in my view, is to translate between the legislature and the university, and that you can go both ways, right? You can take legislation and you can go, well, what does that mean to research? And certainly Stephen's group does that. I think Stephen's group also, and I've seen them do this, so I know they do it, would take a piece of research that we do and go, okay, what does that mean to a legislator so that when legislative policy is implemented, it's clearly understood to a layperson what that science is really about. And I think we have a role here in ATI to help that process go in both directions and maybe to give you a little more help in trying to do that. So I think your question is pretty timely in that regard.
Thanks for the comment. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else want to take a shot, throw a tomato or whatever? Okay, I hear stone silence. So I will take that as we're ready to go eat lunch or do something else. So I hope y'all have a good day and a great holiday weekend.